Welcome to Brainish English Stories.
The two men on trial, César Isidore Brument and Prosper Napoleon Cornu, came to the Court of Assizes of Saint-Infrier. They were accused of trying to kill Madame Brument by drowning her. Madame Brument is the legal wife of Brument. The two men sat together on the usual bench for people on trial. They were both peasants. The first man, Brument, was short and fat. He had short arms and legs, and his head was round and red with pimples. His head sat directly on his body, which was also round and short, so it looked like he had no neck. The other man, Cornu, Prosper Napoleon, was thin and of medium height, with very long arms. His head was crooked, his jaw was uneven, and he looked sideways. He wore a blue shirt, as long as a dress, that went down to his knees. His yellow hair was thin and flat on his head, which made his face look dirty and tired and a bit scary. People called him the Cure because he could make sounds like church chanting and even like a serpent. Many people came to his cafe, for he was a bar owner in Cricktot, to hear him imitate the Mass. They liked the Mass at Cornu's more than the one at church. Madame Brument sat on the witness bench. She was a thin peasant woman who looked sleepy all the time. She sat still, with her hands crossed on her knees, staring straight ahead with a blank expression. The judge started questioning her. "Well, then, Madame Brument, they came into your house and threw you into a barrel full of water. Tell us what happened. Stand up." She stood up. She looked very tall with her cap, which looked like a white skull cap. She spoke in a slow, drawn-out way. "I was shelling beans. Just then, they came in. I thought to myself, what is wrong with them? They don't seem normal. They seem up to some bad things. They watched me from the side, like this, especially Cornu, because he squints. I don't like seeing them together, because they are two bad men when they're together. I asked, what do you want with me? They didn't answer. I started to feel suspicious." Brument interrupted her quickly, saying, "I was drunk." Then Cornu, looking at Brument, said in a deep voice, "Say we were both drunk and you won't be lying." The judge asked strictly, "Do you mean that you were both drunk?" Brument, "Yes, no question about it." Cornu, "That could happen to anyone." The judge, to Madame Brument, continued telling us what happened. Madame Brument, "Well," Brument asked me, "Do you want to earn 100 sous?" "Yes," I said, "because 100 sous isn't easy to find." Then he said, "Pay attention and do as I do." He went to get the large empty barrel that was under the water pipe in the corner, turned it over, brought it into my kitchen, and put it in the middle of the floor. Then he told me, "Go get water and fill it up." So I went to the pond with 2 buckets. I carried water and more water for an hour because the barrel was very large, almost like a big tub, if you'll excuse me, Mr. President. During this time, Brument and Cornu kept drinking. They had 1 glass, then another, and then another. They were finishing their drinks when I said to them, "You're as full as this barrel. Brument replied, "Don't worry, keep working. Your turn will come. Everyone gets their share." I didn't pay much attention because he was drunk. When the barrel was full to the top, I said, "There, it's done." Then Cornu gave me 100 sous, not Brument, but Cornu. He gave me the money. And Brument asked, "Do you want to earn 100 sous more?" "Yes," I said, because I'm not used to getting such gifts. Then he said, "Take off your clothes." "Take off my clothes?" "Yes," he said. "How many should I take off?" "If it bothers you, you can keep on your underclothes. That won't bother us." 100 sous is 100 sous, so I started to undress, even though I didn't want to undress in front of these two men. I took off my cap, then my jacket, then my skirt, and then my wooden shoes. Brument said, "Keep on your stockings, too. We're nice guys." And Cornu said, "Yes, we're nice guys." So there I was, almost like Eve in the garden. They got up from their chairs, but couldn't stand straight because they were so drunk, if you'll excuse me, Mr. President. I thought, what are they going to do? Brument said, "Are you ready?" Cornu said, "I'm ready." Then they grabbed me. Brument took me by the head and Cornu by the feet, like you would carry a sheet that's been washed. Then I started screaming. Brument said, "Be quiet, you troublesome woman." They lifted me up in the air and put me into the barrel full of water. I felt a cold shock go all through me, deep inside. Brument asked, "Is that all?" Cornu said, "That's all." Brument said, "Her head isn't in. That will make a difference." Cornu said, "Put her head in, too." Then Brument pushed my head down as if to drown me. Water went up my nose, and I felt like I was going to die. He pushed my head down, and I disappeared under the water. Then he must have gotten scared. He pulled me out and said, "Go get dry, you poor thing." As for me, I ran as fast as I could to the priest's house. He gave me a skirt that belonged to his servant because I was almost naked, and then he went to get Maître Chiquet, the village watchman. Maître Chiquet went to Cricktot to get the police, and they came back to my house with me. When we got there, we found Brument and Cornu fighting each other like two rams. Brument was shouting, "I'm telling you it isn't true. There's at least 1 cubic meter in it. It's the method that was wrong." Cornu shouted back, "For buckets, that's almost half a cubic meter. Don't argue. That's what it is." The police captain arrested both men. I have nothing more to say. Madame Brument sat down. The people in the courtroom laughed. The jury looked at each other, surprised. The judge asked, "Defendant Cornu, it seems like you started this terrible plan. What do you have to say?" Cornu stood up and replied, "Judge, I was drunk." The judge replied seriously, "I know that. Go on." "I will. Well, Brument came to my place around 9 o'clock. He ordered 2 drinks and said, 'Here's one for you, Cornu.' I sat down with him and we both drank. Then, to be polite, I offered him a drink. He did the same, and we kept drinking like this until noon. By then, we were both drunk. Then Brument started to cry. That made me feel sad. I asked him what was wrong. He said, I need 1,000 francs by Thursday. That made me think for a moment. Then, suddenly, he said, I'll sell you my wife. I was drunk and I'm a widower. You understand, that got my interest. I didn't know his wife, but she was a woman, right? I asked, how much do you want for her? He thought about it, or pretended to. When you're drunk, you're not very clear-minded, and he replied, I'll sell her by the cubic meter. That didn't surprise me because I was as drunk as he was, and in my work, I know what a cubic meter is. It's 1,000 liters, and that seemed fine to me. But we needed to decide the price. It depends on the quality. So I asked, how much do you want per cubic meter? He replied, 2,000 francs. I jumped like a rabbit, but then I thought about it. A woman can't be more than 300 liters. So I said, that's too much. He said, I can't take less. I'd lose money. You understand? Ha, ha, ha. So I said, if she were brand new, I wouldn't say anything. But she's been with you for a while, so she's not as fresh as before. I'll give you 1,500 francs per cubic meter, no more. Is that okay? He agreed, and we left, arm in arm. In this world, we must help each other. But then I got worried. How will you measure her unless you put her in water? He explained his plan to me, with some trouble because he was drunk. He said, I'll take a barrel and fill it with water to the top. I'll put her in it. We'll measure the water that spills out. That way we'll know. I said, I understand. But the water that spills will flow away. How will you collect it? Then he tried to explain that we'd refill the barrel with water after she left. All the water we'd add would be her measurement. I thought it would take about 10 buckets, which would be close to a cubic meter. He's not so foolish when he's drunk, that old guy. To keep it short, we reached his house and I looked at his wife. She's not beautiful, you can see for yourself. I thought, I'm disappointed, but it doesn't matter. Beautiful or ugly, it's the same, right, Mr. President? Then I saw she was as thin as a stick. I thought, she won't measure more than 400 liters. I know liquids well. She already told you what happened. I even let her keep her underclothes and stockings, even though it wasn't to my advantage. After that, she ran away. I said, watch out, Brument. She's escaping. He replied, don't worry. I'll catch her. She has to come back to sleep. I'll measure what's missing. We measured. Not even 4 buckets. Ha, ha, ha. Cornu laughed so much that a policeman had to poke him to make him stop. When he calmed down, he continued. In short, Brument shouted, no, that's not enough. I shouted and he shouted back. We kept hitting each other. That could have gone on forever since we were both drunk. Then the police came. They yelled at us and took us to prison. I want compensation. Cornu sat down. Brument confirmed that everything Cornu said was true. The jury, in shock, went out to discuss. After an hour, They returned with a decision to let both men go free. But they gave a strong warning about the importance of marriage and clear rules for business deals. Brument went back to his home with his wife. Cornu returned to his business.